Welcome to the deep dive. We've got some really interesting material to work through today on production processes. It's a pretty big topic, but we're aiming to really boil it down to the most important stuff you need.
Yeah, I think of it as like a cheat sheet for understanding how businesses actually create value.
Mhm.
We'll be looking at how organizations make tangible goods and services. And we're covering a lot of ground. The definition of production, different methodologies, ways to boost efficiency, lean approaches, the impact of technology, the importance of quality, managing resources and capacity, and even strategies for handling inventory.
Absolutely. So this is really for anyone, whether you're prepping for a big meeting, trying to learn about a new industry, or just someone who likes understanding how things work. We'll break down even the complicated parts into something you can actually use.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's jump right in. What are production processes at their core?
At their most basic, production processes are the way businesses turn raw materials, components, and resources into those finished products or services that customers want. The whole idea is to make those initial inputs more valuable,
Or useful to the end user.
Yeah, exactly. It's about taking something basic and transforming it into something that people actually need and want. And managing these processes well, that's super important for businesses to get right.
Yeah.
It's all about using resources strategically, managing costs, and that ultimately translates to profitability and competitiveness. If a company can't produce efficiently or the quality isn't good, they're going to have a hard time.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It sounds like production is connected to lots of different parts of a company.
It really is. You can't just think of production in isolation. It's woven into all the other key functions. Take marketing, for example.
Yeah.
They need to understand what can be produced and how quickly.
So they can set the right expectations.
Exactly. Then there's finance. They play a crucial role by investing in the equipment and materials. And of course, you've got human resources. They're the ones finding and developing those skilled workers who are doing the actual productions, a whole interconnected system.
Yeah, it all has to work together. So it seems like the product a company makes and how much demand there is for it will influence the production approach.
For sure. A company that specializes in highly customized, one-off things will operate way differently from a company that's set up to make millions of identical products. And that leads right into the different methods of production, which is what we're digging into next. We'll be focusing on three main ones:
Okay.
job production, batch production, and flow production.
Perfect. Let's start with job production. What makes this one unique?
Job production is all about creating something truly one of a kind. Each product is custom designed and built to meet the exact needs of a specific customer. Think of it like each item is its own unique project.
So what are some of the telltale signs you're dealing with job production?
Well, first of all, the output is always unique and almost always highly customized. That means you need a team of highly skilled people who can tackle a variety of tasks.
People who can see a project through from start to finish.
Yes, exactly. And because it's so individualized and relies on those special skills, production takes longer. And usually, the cost per item ends up being higher than with other methods. But the main focus is usually on achieving really high quality that hits the customer's specific requirements.
Can you give us some examples to illustrate this?
Of course. Imagine a wedding cake designed and baked for a specific couple, or a bespoke suit made to fit one person's measurements exactly.
Or a custom-built home or a handcrafted piece of furniture.
Yeah, those are all perfect examples. And it's worth pointing out, the higher price isn't just about the time it takes. It often reflects the cost of highly specialized skills and the risks involved in one-off projects where mistakes can be really expensive to fix.
That's interesting. So what are the main advantages of job production?
One of the biggest benefits is that you can achieve exceptionally high quality.
Because of the focus and the skills of the craftspeople.
Right. And because each product is so unique and tailored, companies using this method can often charge more for their products. Plus, customers tend to be really satisfied because they're getting something made just for them. And job satisfaction is often higher for the workers, too.
Yeah, it makes sense they'd feel more pride in creating something unique.
Absolutely. And then there's the flexibility to adapt to customer requests, even making changes during the production process.
That's a big advantage. But I'm guessing there are downsides, too.
Oh, definitely. As you can imagine, the cost per unit is pretty high. You're relying on skilled labor, and each item takes a while to make. That longer production time can be a problem if a customer needs something quickly.
They might go with a competitor who can deliver faster.
Exactly. And job production can be inefficient if there are delays.
Or unexpected problems.
Right. And it often needs specialized tools that might not be used all the time. Also, the workload for the skilled workers can be uneven, with busy times followed by slower periods.
Okay, so who benefits the most from job production?
It's a really good fit for businesses in niche markets or those making high-value items in smaller quantities.
Where the focus is on customization and quality.
Exactly. In those situations, the higher cost and longer wait are okay for the customer because they're getting something exclusive and personalized.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about batch production. How is this different?
So batch production is all about making a specific quantity, a batch of identical items at the same time. Then you switch gears and make a batch of something else. It could be the same product, but with some variations.
Like a bakery making cookies. One batch is chocolate chip, then they clean the equipment and make a batch of oatmeal raisin.
That's it. That's a great example. Some key characteristics of batch production are that you're making a set number of identical products in each batch. You're often using equipment that can be adapted for different runs, and the whole batch usually moves through the production process together.
Makes sense.
And this method is actually more flexible than job production because businesses can make variations of the same product, like different sizes or colors, by running separate batches.
So more examples of batch production would be things like clothing, where you make shirts in different sizes and colors, or pharmaceuticals, where you manufacture a specific quantity of a drug.
Yeah, those are good examples. Even magazines printed in specific runs are made using batch production.
Interesting. So what are the main advantages of batch production?
It's generally cheaper per unit compared to job production.
Because of economies of scale.
Right. The costs are spread across a larger number of items. It's also more flexible than flow production because you can switch between batches.
You can adapt to what you need to make.
Exactly. Plus, you can check for quality at each stage, so if there's a problem, you catch it early. And businesses can adjust the size of their batches to match demand.
So you don't end up with a ton of unsold products.
Right. Overall, it's a more efficient use of resources than job production.
Okay, what about the downsides? What are the potential hiccups?
One of the biggest challenges is the time it takes to set up the equipment and switch between batches.
That downtime could be costly.
Yeah, it can. Then there's the risk and cost of holding inventory, especially of those partially finished goods waiting for the next stage.
It's a balancing act.
Right. You don't want too much stock just sitting around. And sometimes machinery might not be used all the time, which is inefficient.
So you're paying for equipment that isn't always producing.
Exactly. And another issue is that if there's a quality problem, it could affect the whole batch. That can lead to a lot of waste. And the initial setup costs for batch production can be higher than job production.
Okay, so batch production is a sort of compromise between two different approaches.
It really is. It combines the ability to customize a bit, like in job production, with some of the efficiency of flow production. It's a good choice for companies that make a range of similar products but need to meet fluctuating demand.
It allows them to adjust to what the market wants.
That's it.
Okay, let's move on to the last of our production methods. Flow production. What's the key concept here?
Flow production, which is sometimes called continuous production, is all about a nonstop, uninterrupted process. The products move along an assembly line. Each stage follows the next in a specific order. And just to give you a heads up, this continuous nature also makes flow production less agile when it comes to making product changes. Even small design tweaks can be really expensive because of the interconnectedness of the whole system.
So you've got a continuous stream of identical products being made.
That's exactly it. It's about high volumes of standardized products, using specialized machinery set up in a specific sequence. Workers usually have very specific, repetitive tasks along the assembly line. The whole point is to keep that flow going with as few delays as possible.
Where do we see flow production in action?
Car manufacturing plants are a classic example, as are electronics factories. Large-scale food and beverage production like Coca-Cola or Heinz use it too. And mass-produced clothing is another common one.
Yeah, I can picture those giant assembly lines. What are the benefits of a system like this?
It's all about maximizing output and efficiency. Flow production can crank out a huge amount of product. And because it's continuous and often automated, it's incredibly efficient.
It's like a well-oiled machine.
That's a great way to put it. And that efficiency means lower production costs per unit. The more you make, the cheaper each item becomes.
It's the classic economies of scale.
Exactly. And because everything is so standardized, you usually get very consistent quality. Flow production also typically means shorter lead times, so customers get their products faster. And because it's a constant flow, managing inventory is often simpler.
So many positives. But are there any drawbacks?
Of course, there are always trade-offs. One of the biggest hurdles is the upfront cost.
You have to invest a lot in the specialized machines.
Yes. The initial investment can be huge, and once you're set up, it can be hard to change things. It's expensive to switch to a new product or alter the process.
That's not very flexible.
No, not at all. And those repetitive tasks can lead to unmotivated workers. Plus, if one part of the assembly line breaks down, the whole thing can grind to a halt.
So a single issue can have a massive impact.
It can. And because it's all about mass production, the products tend to be very standardized, which might not appeal to every customer.
So it's really best for making the same thing over and over again.
Right. Flow production works best for businesses making huge quantities of identical mass-market products where there's a steady high demand. The goal is to keep costs down and keep things standardized, which isn't the right fit for products that need a lot of customization or changes.
Got it. Okay, we've covered the main methods for producing things. Now, how can those processes be improved? How do businesses boost efficiency and productivity?
That's a question every business should be asking. Efficiency, like we've been talking about, means getting the most output from a given input, or using the least input for a certain output.
Doing more with less.
Yeah. And productivity is usually measured as the output per worker or per unit of resource. Getting better at both of these things is essential for businesses to cut costs, increase output, and stay competitive.
So what are some strategies businesses can use to get there?
Technology is a major factor. Automating processes, where you use machines and robots to do tasks that people used to do, can really boost speed and accuracy.
Plus, it can lower labor costs in the long run.
Right. And then you have CAD/CAM, which stands for Computer-Aided Design and Computer-Aided Manufacturing.
I've always been curious about CAD/CAM. It sounds like a game changer in terms of how things are made.
It really is. CAD software lets engineers create digital blueprints that are super precise. And then CAM software uses those designs to control the manufacturing equipment. It makes the whole process much smoother.
Okay, so technology is a big part of it. What else are companies doing?
Thinking about the workspace itself is important too. Arranging equipment and workstations in a way that minimizes movement can save time and effort.
It's about streamlining the workflow.
Exactly. And employee training is really important too.
Yeah.
Well-trained workers can do their jobs more efficiently, which leads to higher productivity.
You need people who know what they're doing.
For sure. And then there's employee motivation. Motivated workers are simply more productive.
It makes a big difference.
It does. Then, standardizing processes, having clear procedures for doing things, can reduce variability and errors and make things faster.
Everyone's on the same page, doing things the same way.
Exactly. And let's not forget about lean production techniques. We've got just-in-time inventory management, and then there's Kaizen, which is a philosophy focused on minimizing waste and always striving for improvement.
So it's a constant process of getting better.
It has to be.
Okay, you mentioned lean production. Can you explain what lean means in this context?
Lean production is like a way of thinking about business, where the focus is on cutting out waste and maximizing efficiency in everything you do. The main idea is to get rid of anything that doesn't actually add value to the final product or service.
It's about trimming the fat.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. If you can eliminate everything that's unnecessary, you can really reduce costs and improve the quality of your products.
So what kinds of waste are we talking about here?
There are 7 main types, which are often called muda, the Japanese word for waste.
Okay.
First, you've got overproduction, which is making more than you need at that moment. Then there's waiting, where workers or equipment are idle. Unnecessary transportation is another one, moving things around more than you need to.
I see.
And then there are defects, products that aren't up to standard. Excess inventory is considered waste too, because you're spending money to store things you don't need right now. Then there's unnecessary motion, where workers are moving in ways that don't add value. And finally, extra processing, adding steps that don't really matter to the customer.
It's a very thorough way of looking at inefficiency. How do companies actually tackle all of these types of waste?
One of the big ideas in Lean is continuous improvement, or Kaizen, as it's often called. It's about making lots of small changes over time. Everyone in the company is encouraged to find ways to do things better. Even small improvements can add up to big gains in the long run.
And what about just in time? How does that fit in?
Just in time, or JIT, is all about having materials arrive just when you need them to minimize the amount of stock you're holding onto. It's a key part of Lean. But one thing to consider with JIT is that you're basically shifting the responsibility for managing inventory onto your suppliers.
Yeah, you're relying on them more heavily.
Exactly. That means you need strong relationships and good communication to make sure it works.
Remind us again how JIT works in practice.
With JIT, You're aiming to have the bare minimum of stock on hand. Raw materials, components, even the finished products, they only arrive at the factory or store when they're actually needed. This means lower storage costs, less risk of things getting old or damaged, and you don't have as much money tied up in stock.
Okay, but we touched on the risk before. What are the potential downsides of JIT?
The big one is that it depends on having really reliable suppliers.
They need to deliver on time and with the right quality every time.
Exactly. And if there's a disruption in the supply chain, you're more vulnerable because you don't have much buffer stock.
There's no cushion.
Right. And if there's a sudden increase in demand, it can be difficult to keep up.
So it's a system that needs to be really well managed.
Absolutely. Businesses need to weigh the benefits and risks carefully. They have to have good relationships with their suppliers and clear communication to make it work. And more broadly, adopting lean production isn't just about using certain tools. It's a whole change in the company's culture.
It's a commitment to eliminating waste and always improving.
That's it.
Okay, let's get back to some of the tools. How has technology really changed production?
Technology has had a huge impact on pretty much every industry. Automation and CAD/CAM are two of the biggest game changers.
We talked about automation earlier, but let's dig into it a bit more. What changes are we seeing because of it?
Like we said before, automation is using machines and robots to do jobs that people used to do. This can be something simple and repetitive, or it can be really sophisticated, like robotic assembly lines doing complex tasks. The benefits are huge.
Automation can really speed things up.
It does. And it can make production more efficient overall, so businesses can produce more in less time. Plus, automated systems are much more accurate and consistent than people.
So it leads to better quality and fewer variations in the product.
Exactly. And while the initial investment can be high, automation can actually reduce labor costs in the long run. Plus, it allows businesses to do things that are dangerous for people or that are really repetitive, which can help with worker safety and reduce errors.
But I'm guessing there are some downsides too. It can't all be positive.
Of course not. The initial cost of buying and installing all the equipment can be really high. That's a big financial commitment. And there's the potential for job losses, which is a concern.
When machines take over from human workers,
Right. Plus, you still need skilled technicians to keep those automated systems running smoothly.
they need to be maintained and repaired.
Exactly. And while automated systems are great at repetitive tasks, they're not always as flexible as humans when something unexpected happens.
Or if a product design needs to change.
Exactly. So it's not a simple solution.
And what about CAD and CAM? How have these technologies transformed things?
CAD, which stands for Computer-Aided Design, allows engineers and designers to create those digital blueprints we talked about, but in a lot more detail.
They can really get into the nitty-gritty.
Yes. And it makes the design process way faster and more accurate. Designers can easily make changes, try out different options, and even simulate how a product will perform before anything physical is even made.
So it's much more efficient.
Right. And then you have CAM, Computer-Aided Manufacturing, which takes those digital designs and uses them to control the machines that actually make the product. It's a direct link from the design to the production.
So less room for error in translation.
Exactly. This makes the whole process much more efficient, reduces errors, and makes things faster overall. With CAD/CAM, companies can create really complex products with a high level of precision. And because the design and manufacturing are so closely linked, product development is faster and quality is better overall.
Okay, so technology is a huge opportunity, but it's not just about buying the latest and greatest.
Exactly. Companies need to think carefully about costs, the benefits they expect to get, and the impact on their workers. They need to consider how it affects their ability to adapt to changes before investing heavily in automation or CAD/CAM.
Okay, let's shift gears and talk about another crucial aspect of production: quality control.
Absolutely. Quality control is about having systems in place to ensure that the products you make consistently meet specific standards and, most importantly, meet or exceed what your customers expect.
It's about making sure things are done right.
Exactly. It's really important because it directly affects customer satisfaction, the company's reputation, and ultimately how profitable and sustainable the business is.
Why is it so important to get quality control right?
When your customers are happy with the quality, they're more likely to come back for more. And when you have a reputation for high quality, it makes you stand out from the competition and can even let you charge higher prices.
It gives you an edge.
Right. But if quality is bad, well, then you end up wasting a lot of resources on fixing or scrapping defective products.
Not to mention returns, recalls, and damage to your reputation.
Exactly. All of that can really hurt a business.
So how do companies ensure quality in their production processes?
There are a few ways. Inspection is a common one. Products are checked at different stages to look for defects or anything that doesn't match the quality standards.
Some inspections are just visual, right?
Yeah. Sometimes it's as simple as looking at the product. Other times it involves using special equipment and tests. Then there's setting clear quality standards.
Benchmarks.
Yes, exactly. These standards are often based on industry certifications like ISO 9001, which helps to make sure products meet a recognized level of quality. Some companies also use quality circles.
What are those?
These are groups of employees who meet regularly to talk about quality issues and suggest solutions. It helps create a culture where everyone is focused on quality.
So it's not just a top-down thing.
Right. And then there's total quality management, or TQM.
Yeah.
This is a whole philosophy that gets everyone in the company involved in constantly improving quality. It focuses on preventing defects rather than just finding them after they happen.
So it's about building quality into every step of the process from the start.
That's the key. It's much better and usually cheaper to prevent problems than to fix them later.
Okay. We've covered producing efficiently and making sure things meet quality standards. Now let's talk about how companies use their resources effectively. Let's dive into capacity utilization.
Capacity utilization is basically how much of a business's resources, like machinery, equipment, and labor, are actually being used compared to their maximum potential. It's usually expressed as a percentage.
So it tells you how efficiently they're using what they have.
Exactly. And just a quick note, while high utilization is usually good, it's important to remember that sometimes bottlenecks in one area can limit overall production, even if other areas have extra capacity.
So one weak link can hold everything back.
Right.
Okay, how do you calculate that percentage?
It's pretty simple. You take the actual output you achieve over a period of time, divided by the maximum possible output you could have achieved with the resources you had, and then multiply that by 100% to get the percentage.
Okay, so why do companies need to pay attention to their capacity utilization?
A higher percentage usually means they're using their resources well, and that could mean lower cost per unit, because fixed costs like rent and utilities are spread out over more units.
It's like when you buy in bulk at the grocery store. The more you buy, the cheaper each item is.
That's a good analogy. Efficient use of resources also means higher profits, and having enough capacity means you can meet customer demand without big delays.
Okay, so the goal is always to operate at 100% capacity then.
Not always. When capacity utilization is low, it means resources are being wasted. But working at 100% all the time can actually cause problems too.
It's like running a machine at full speed all the time. It's going to wear out faster.
Right. You can put a lot of stress on equipment and workers, and that increases the risk of breakdowns. You might end up rushing production, and quality could suffer.
Makes sense.
And when you're operating at max capacity, you don't have much wiggle room if there's a sudden increase in demand or an unexpected problem.
So it's not just about hitting the highest number possible.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where you're being efficient and profitable without overworking your resources or sacrificing quality. And having some extra capacity gives you flexibility if something unexpected comes up.
Okay, we're almost at the end of our deep dive. Let's talk about inventory management, which is often really important but sometimes overlooked.
For sure. Inventory, or stock, is all the raw materials, unfinished goods, and finished products a business has on hand. Managing that well is crucial.
You need to have enough to meet demand, but not so much that it costs you a fortune to store.
Right. Effective stock control keeps production running smoothly, makes sure you can fill orders quickly, and minimizes those storage costs.
Things like warehousing, insurance, and the risk of products going bad or becoming obsolete.
Exactly. Plus, it affects cash flow. When too much money is tied up in unsold stock, you can't use it for other things.
Okay, what are the main approaches to managing inventory?
There are two we hear about a lot: just in case, or JIC, and just in time, which is often called JIT. We've already talked about JIT in the context of lean production.
Okay, let's start with just in case. What's the idea behind it?
It's a more traditional approach where a company keeps a large amount of stock on hand. This is so they can always meet demand, even if there's a sudden surge in orders or problems with the supply chain.
It's like a safety net.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
The main advantage is that you're usually ready to fulfill orders without delays. Plus, you might be able to get discounts by buying in bulk.
So it sounds like a pretty reliable system. Are there any downsides?
Well, holding a lot of stock costs money. You have to pay for storage, insurance, and security.
Those costs can add up quickly.
They can. Plus, there's the risk of the inventory becoming outdated or getting damaged while it's sitting in storage. And a lot of the company's money is tied up in that stock, so it can't be used for other things.
Okay, and then there's just in time. Can you remind us about the key principles of JIT?
With JIT, the goal is to keep inventory levels as low as possible. Materials, components, even finished products, they don't arrive until they're needed for production or to fulfill an order.
So it's all about timing.
Exactly.
What are the main advantages companies are aiming for with a JIT system?
The biggest ones are lower storage costs, less risk of stock going bad or becoming obsolete, and having more cash available to use elsewhere in the business.
Okay, but like we discussed before, I'm assuming there are some trade-offs and potential challenges with JIT too.
You're right. JIT really depends on having suppliers you can count on.
They need to deliver exactly what you need when you need it.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And because you don't have much extra stock on hand, any disruptions in the supply chain can be a big problem.
There's less room for error.
Right. It also makes it tougher to handle any sudden increases in demand.
So it seems like choosing between JIC and JIT is a really important decision for businesses to make.
It is. The best choice depends on a lot of things, like the types of products they make, how stable customer demand is, how reliable their suppliers are, and how much it costs to store inventory. Companies need to think about all of these things to figure out which system works best for them.
Okay, wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have. We started with the basics of production processes, looked at the pros and cons of job, batch, and flow production, explored ways to improve efficiency and productivity, delved into lean production, and talked about how technology has changed manufacturing. Then we covered the importance of quality control, talked about capacity utilization, and finished up with those different inventory management strategies.
It's been a really informative discussion. I think anyone listening now has a much better understanding of these key production principles and how they affect businesses all over the world.
I agree. Whether you came in with specific questions or were just curious about how things are made, you now have a good foundation for understanding how businesses operate, manage their resources, and create value for their customers.
As we wrap up, here's something to think about.
Yeah.
Imagine you were launching a brand new product. Which production method would you choose and why? Or think about a company you know. How are they using lean production or a specific inventory management technique like JIT? It's really interesting to see these ideas in action in the real world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.